Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the new Mythic of Mistralus. So, she's in the Glory Gem Guild and VIP chest for this week only, and then she'll be in the drop table with everything else. So if you want to try to get her, this will be the best week to do so by using your spare keys. The only two keys she is not in is gold keys and of course event keys, which still maintain the troops of the event. But anyways, as far as this new Mythic, she is pretty decent and worth considering going after. She has a couple things going for. For one, she's the second Mythic in the game to have a extra turn. She's the exact same color as the other one that has an extra turn, which is High King Iron Gut, which has posed to be a pretty good delve option, but this is the first one that can kind of be used for other situations like PvP and Guild Wars pretty effectively, given the fact that extra turn is always pretty powerful, and having it on a Mythic is obviously going to be even more powerful. This thing is very similar to many of the Infernus-like troops in that it has a bunch of random splash damages. This one is even more random, given that the number that it does can vary pretty heavily, which is probably going to be her biggest downside, because if you're expecting her to do a lot of damage and she only does one, then she's not really going to be doing much. But if she does like 3 or 4, then she's obviously going to be doing a pretty substantial amount of damage, because she'll be able to not only hit all of them for a direct hit, but also do adjacent damage for 50%, which is pretty strong. However, where it really comes in, which will be interesting, is the jumble board into gain an extra turn. Obviously hard countered by freeze, but if you can do this, you can get some good alignments. She can trigger a lot of extra turns. Jumble is generally really good, especially if you have a storm in play, for getting a lot of extra turns, because Jumble itself can't land any extra turns on the board. However, it'll order the board in a way where a lot of things can be taken for 4 times and 5 times matches. So it's going to be very, very beneficial on teams that do benefit a lot from getting a lot of extra turns. It's also quite a bit of different of a board control compared to most other options in the game, where you just convert something or clear out the whole board, as it's quite unique and very, very few things actually use this, and she's probably one of the only few viable, if not the only viable thing in the game that actually has a jumble at this current moment in time for late game play. Other than that, she has 2 things going good for her on traits. She has some spell reduction, which is pretty good because casting is always pretty strong in the game, and still is, so having a little bit of reduction for that for things like Guild War and such is pretty nice. And the main component she has is a 4 times enchant. She now is the first thing to have on her trait, a 4 times enchant. This is going to be pretty useful. Basically what enchant does is 2 mana every single turn, and until you end up doing your cast. So this is pretty good against mana drain teams, since if they do a small mana drain to you, you can get it right back up with enchant. And it's also good just for doing mana accumulation, particularly in things like Guild War, where you are blocked on certain colors. So let's say like a yellow Guild War day, and you're blocked on a bunch of yellow because you were using maybe like another big mythic with it or something. You'll still be able to give it some mana, because it's going to be doing 2 mana per turn, regardless if they're completely blocked on their mana or not. So even your last slot, which might be completely blocked by every other thing on your team by mana, can still be accumulating 2 per turn off of the enchant. So it'll have some potential in that regard. This thing obviously isn't going to want to drop too many turns, because it would rather extra turn spam like crazy than actually drop it. But whenever you do end up dropping your turn, you'll end up getting 2 mana to your entire team every single time. So it's going to be okay. It's pretty similar to many of the other Infernus-like troops, just with an extra turn attached. It does not have a storm attached to it though, but that isn't too hard to go do like a brown storm with Alpha Mountain Crusher, yellow storm off a Stormcaller, or something like that in order to make it work. Maybe even a blue storm off a Jar of Eyes, since it doesn't explode on the brown, and synergizes into that if you have a Jar of Eyes weapon. But anyways, let's go get this troop. We'll go over a couple teams and see how it can perform, because obviously we haven't used it yet, as I do not own it yet. So we'll do some first impressions, see what we can do. Hopefully get it pretty early. Also, good thing we got a Frost Feather there. I actually have not maxed it yet. Still need a few more copies. I think that came out last July, and I just didn't bother getting it maxed. So we're just like naturally getting it. Oh gosh. Well, we got it maxed probably. Well, that works. That's convenient. It's not what I'm looking for though. I'm looking for the Mythic. Though luckily that's one less thing we need to use a blue orb on, if nothing else. Save those for other things to save gem values on events, as many events do save quite a bit of value off of doing that. Oh, I thought I didn't have it maxed either. No, we did. There's very few things we don't have maxed, but we'll go for that. And one of them is owning this Mythic. Getting a lot of Queen Titania. She's a good troop. Don't need more copies of her though. At this point, I might as well just throw the rest of this stack, because I think we're gonna have to go into Glory Keys. Yep, that is unfortunate. Yagwe though. But let's go and switch over to Glory Keys. We have plenty here. So we went through all of our 700 something gem keys. Now we have 20,000 glory keys, and worst comes to worst, we of course have all the seals, which we can go throw. And seals, oddly enough, actually have the highest chance of giving a mythic. One of the main reasons I haven't actually gone and used them all is mostly because they might add more things to guild eventually. Of course, we ended up getting a whole new 6 tasks, and while it's very unlikely that we'll get another 6 tasks anytime soon, it is within the realm of possibilities. that we eventually get another 6 troops that will be within that drop table. And to get them done a bit quicker, we'll probably want to have a little bit of spare keys to throw it on, kind of like how we had to do it for when the other 6 end up coming into the game. But nonetheless, hopefully we'll get the Mythic here. But yeah, seal keys at max chest is technically the best rate of getting Mythic. That's not a VIP key, of course. Obviously, VIP keys are absolute best. However, they are very expensive. It costs 2,250 gems to open up 50 of them. And it also requires you to have spent $130 on the game. Or at least $130 worth of VIP points, because there's occasionally ways to get more VIP points than how much you actually spend on the game. Well, so far, no Mythic. We'll find it eventually, though. There it is, right as I say that. Mistralis, and I'm only going to go for 1 copy. Theoretically, she would be okay with 2. Obviously, her final trait wouldn't really be much of a benefit with 2. But she would have a double caster, and given that you have enchant, the fact that the second one's completely blocked wouldn't be as big a deal. But personally, I would just stop at 1. But there we go. So we got our 1 copy. Let's go and max this out. It is a Mythic after all, so let's go and just use some orbs on it just to instantly get it maxed. Just simply use a big, where are they? Big green. Get that maxed. Boom. All leveled. Big orange. Boom. Maxed. All traded. There we go. Obviously, we can't metal it because the Mythics are excessively expensive to metal. Though, would it be worth it to metal? It does gain a lot of magic. This actually would be a Mythic that would be within the realm of potentially worth it. However, given that it's going to take so long to upgrade Mythics, I would still hold off. The meta might be changing by the time you have 9. If you want to go for a guaranteed 100% chance of upgrading Mythic, the meta would probably have changed a lot by the time there are 9 Mythic medals in the game. Or by the time you have one, or that many. And for that reason, you kind of want to end up waiting to see what the meta will be. Because there's a good chance most people won't have that many medals until next year. I think I'm currently sitting on like 3.5 as far as how many we have right now. So we still got a ways to go before we hit 9 for a guaranteed chance to upgrade a Mythic. Obviously, some people are trying to upgrade Mythics without a guaranteed chance. I wouldn't really advise it, though, because you might waste a lot of resources, particularly souls. But if you're going for 100% chance, you'd probably want to hold off on upgrading any Mythic at all. Just because by the time you do have enough to fully max one, the meta of the game will probably be changed quite substantially. But anyways, let's go put this into teams. I obviously use Iron Gut as a placeholder, as that is the only other troop in the game with extra turn. I wasn't actually testing these teams with that, obviously. I was just using it as a little placeholder since it's somewhat similar. Did I remember to put in all 4? I have 4 teams here. Why did I feel like I forgot to put it into 1? Aha! That is why. Okay, so all of them. Just making sure. So let's go mess with these teams now. I'll start with the cheapest team and then mess with 1 per color. Keep in mind, still a lot of testing to do. This is mostly just first impressions with it. Don't ever buy that. That's a waste of money. And the flash offer is not too bad, though. But the thing that comes up whenever you get like a Mythic or new Legend or something is excessively bad value. Like what it's selling right now, we just did with like 2 orbs. And it's trying to do it for like 35 bucks. Even for $2, it would almost be too expensive. But anyways, what we're doing, let's go and fight into here. Looks like we're up against a almost pure blue team. Actually, it's a pure red team. Interesting. So pure red Guild War team. Let's go use the cheap team first. So with this, this is the cheapest team that I end up composing with her. So if you want to just put her into something, this is just one that I made up. So we have ourselves a Essence of Evil with Titan. I'm specifically using this Titan with the Barrier on Brown, of course, but also with Elemental Magic. One of the main reasons for Elemental Magic is because this does count as an Elemental, and there are a lot of really good Elemental synergies. I didn't really mention that at the beginning, but one of her biggest aspects, actually, is she does count as an Elemental. So you do get a lot of synergy with that because you can half mana start it. You also get the extra magic off of heroes like Titan. One other benefit that you get with this from using something like Titan with it, compared to other hero classes that have a +1 magic, is it does count as Stormheim as well. This is a Stormheim Mythic after all, and given that it's a Stormheim Mythic, you will end up being able to get a slightly higher bonus with Titan, because if you're using 2 Stormheim troops in your team, we're getting these bonus right here. So we're getting a little bit of life and armor and a little bit of life. Look at that. We're getting, oh god, that's actually a lot of durability. That was a bit higher than I thought. But if you have the pet maxed and everything, look at that. Just with 2 of them, we're getting 15 life and 3 armor. That is not a bad amount of stats to help keep you alive, simply for having the fact that you're using Titan with Mistralis. I noticed it had a bonus. I didn't realize it was that big of a bonus. And Stormheim also gets a star on it, by the way. 17 stars. I believe that's the highest it can reach. Let me double check. Yeah, 17 stars. Can't go any higher than that. It's getting there. Getting close to 20 star kingdoms for all those extra stats. But anyways, let's go in PvP and mess with these. So let's start with the cheapest one and go from there. So right here we're using Essence of Evil. Essence of Evil, if you don't have, you get from 250 wins on Plague Lord hero class. Plague Lord hero class you get from the Darkstone Kingdom. So right here we're going to want to go for an Essence of Evil as immediately as possible. The very unfortunate part right here is that we are 1 mana short, and he ends up getting a stun. That is one other thing that none of these teams actually built into. But if you're finding stun to be a problem, Apothecary is probably one of the better things to synergize with it, or Voice of Orpheus, depending on if you're what pure color you're going for. But yeah, you have to be careful when this gets stunned. It loses almost all of its benefit other than its ability once it's stunned, and if it gets stunned freezed, which it looks like it might actually happen this battle, that is like the worst possible situation you want to see this thing in, because not only it basically loses every possible benefit it has. It doesn't have any kind of board clear, so it doesn't get the value from its ability if you are frozen. And if you're stunned, you don't get your enchant. So here's an instance where we're losing a lot of our value. However, one nice value it does get is the fact that it can bypass Submerge, as you saw right there. Like many of the Infernus-like troops, it does completely go past Submerge, because it's not actually hitting all enemies, even though it will hit all enemies. And the main reason for that is because it is doing a single target damage into adjacent splashes. So it's not technically actually hitting all enemies, even though it is. So we'll go for that. That'll give our mana there. It looks like our hero's going to die. Somehow it does not, and luckily she unfreezes at the most perfect of timing. Unfortunately, we can't take that purple there, but we can still go for this, get a shuffle, hopefully have some kind of other extra turn that we're not frozen on. For example, now we could take the purple, because we could take this brown instead. I'm actually going to take this in a weird way, where we take the 4 times purple into the... Actually, never mind. Regardless of which way I take it, it's going to be 4 times 4 times. So we'll take it that way then. We'll grab the not skull, because... Actually, yeah, we kind of have to grab skull. Do we let him have a skull follow-up, though? So we can take it for extra damage. We could try for... Do we have alignment on this? We probably should go for that then. Obviously, we will lose our turn. However, it will kill his first slot, so we can just cycle that into the next one. So right here, our hero does end up dying, and this specific team does not have a backup summon. But we'll go for that, get our mana accumulation. And even through some of its hard counters, it looks like the cheaper team was able to run through. So that's not too bad. And of course, we do get the random number of hits. One of the bad things that can happen with this is... Oh, or that. Or we could just die to Zugoff, of course. But one of the bad things that can end up happening with it is you only get one single hit when you want to get multiple, and then it ends up failing out. But that's a cheaper team. Essence of Evil them down to disable. Don't get frozen or stunned. Let's actually go for this again, just because that was a hard counter team. We probably should avoid... there's 2 mechanics you want to avoid, stun and freeze. As long as you're not facing either of those 2, you should generally be fine. And we are up against Frost Mage here. Frost Mage is so common in Guild Wars too. Easiest ways to do that is with a cheap cleanser if you end up needing it. But as long as it doesn't have stun, like this time, we should be fine. Because the biggest thing that actually hurt us was not necessarily to freeze the previous battle. It was by far the stun, because we don't get our enchant. That's basically the main gimmick, really, of this Mythic, I would say, is the fact that it has enchant every single time you extra turn. And this is very beneficial for mana accumulating. So even if you're frozen, you're still going to be mana accumulating a lot of mana. So right here, we're going to go and get her ability down. And basically just keep poking with this and hoping that it hits multiple times. Right there, as you can see, we end up getting a 3 poke. Whenever we get a good shuffle, we'll go and throw this down. Otherwise, we board clear. And basically just rinse and repeat. And that's the basic premise of this team. And Essence of Evil whenever something big's about to cast. Like right here, if he doesn't get a Yagwe, we're going to want to disable his Yagwe. And please stop. Stop your extra turn spam. And luckily that thing does have 25% reduction, so it will survive here, or not. Not even 25% shall keep it alive. Well, let's see. We actually still win this if we try with the skull spam. But we don't have alignment, so never mind. We're not going to bother. Looks like it will lose twice in a row, unfortunately. So, we're up against a Lust team now. Lust has a lot of damage that can end up doing from killing. You don't normally see this on other defends, just because, in a Guild War context, just because most people won't set double Lust, just because it will lower down their score. Well, we'll go for this real quick. So this is the Wild Queen variant of this. Wild Queen is basically going to be going and be the other kind of centerpiece of this. You'll be able to get the mana accumulation off of it just by getting a single extra turn into mana accumulating it, even if it ends up getting blocked, and then it can do it all on its own through its green. We have a frontline tank with another Infernus-like troop, which will also be able to apply stun. So if nothing else, we can stun them out before they can stun us out if they have any on trait. But we can go now and just get a good Mountain Crusher out. This will, of course, mana accumulate for everything, as this is, of course, a pure brown team for brown Guild War purposes. So right here, we'll just go and get this out the way, go and get the other thing down, and it will end up dying. And from here, we can go for a nice board shuffle and ideally have an extra turn. As you can currently see, we do not have an extra turn, but there's so much green on the board that we should likely be able to hit one, get another Wild Queen down, do another shuffle to go get our skulls again, and basically just rinse and repeat, and just constantly keep skull spamming over and over and over again, like Wild Queen normally does, but it has a nice shuffle that also applies some damage that can poke them down. So, it ends up going pretty smoothly. Most of these other ones should, however, they use extremely expensive troops compared to the first team. as most of these are almost pure Mythic teams for the most part, except for the last one. So here's another one. One nice thing that you can do on Blue Guild War with it is, as I mentioned, it is elemental, so you all do have capability of using Mirage Queen. Mirage Queen gives 50% mana start to all elemental troops. It also has some skull reduction, but of course the main aspect you're using it for is the 50% reduction. I mean the 50% mana start. It also has Curse if that ends up being applicable for some of the battles, depending on the stats effects that you're bringing. But as far as synergy with her, you're mainly just using it, of course, for the 50% start. So we'll go and just go into that then. And Scepters in first slots. You can end up going for other alternatives depending on what you want to end up going for, what you're aiming for. Apothecary is probably one of the bigger other ones that you'd want to go for in case you need a slot in a cleanse. But we'll go for, as well as Mercy, depending on if you need to counter out purple. Especially given that this team doesn't actually use purple, if you want to go down that route. You have one really good cast, but it's a little bit harder to get mana up on the subsequent casts. But right here, we'll go and I almost want to get last slot to full mana first. We do have Barrier. We are using Titan right now, so we do have a Barrier. So I'm just going to let it poke us. And in a Guild War context, that wouldn't count for any negative score. And now we'll go for our Guarantee extra turn and then do it into Aquaticus. Aquaticus, of course, a very good synergy troop for using with this. So we'll just go take that over, grab ourselves a Aquaticus cast. That will explode half the blues for a little bit of board clear while doing a Guarantee 3. However, she does have light splash rather than full splash. So this thing doing 3 is actually more damage than this thing doing 3, even though it has slightly more magic, just because the 50% adjacent will end up making it ever so slightly more in most situations. Depends what your base stats are. So right here, we could feed other things if we target onto their color. So right here, we'll feed yellow. And unfortunately, 1 mana off. I should have probably counted the amount of yellow. I thought that was enough. Apparently not. Obviously, in the Guild Wars, you probably want to count that out just to make sure. But a little unfortunate there. Luckily, there's an extra turn just sitting there that will fill us up. Keep getting our mana back up, and then we can go for another Aquaticus. If we have alignment on this, we should be going for it. So we are going to go for that right there, just because similar Shuffle is really good for hitting skulls. And it doesn't matter if you're using Mirage Queen or Skull Spammer or what you're using, as long as you have a lot of skulls on the board, even if the enemy would have done it, you can get some pretty good value out of a Shuffle. It's probably one of the bigger things that Shuffle mechanic has been used for actually in the past, is with various Skull Spam teams. And even though she doesn't have Skull Spam specifically on her, she does a nice distribution of damage while also having a that extra turn capability into a jumble, which is pretty decent. Oh, here's the true test of a team. Can it beat Life and Death? So here we're running an elemental bow with 3 Infernus troops. Mistralis, Aquaticus, and Infernus. Arguably the 3 stronger ones of the Infernus-like troops. The 4 times burn off of this. Firestorm into itself for 1 turn, so we get some mana accumulation into an extra turn. Perpetual Yellow Storm. I am actually using Stormcaller with this rather than Elemental. Main reason for this is as it's pure yellow, we do want to mostly have a Yellow Storm, and Infernus will get a 1-turn Red Storm, which will be beneficial for it to get its mana back after it does its thing, after it gets a kill, but it's still perpetually going to be yellow. We have ourselves the Mistralis just to shuffle up the board, and Aquaticus for doing the board clear, basically, as well as Infernus having the capability of board clearing, but we'll most likely be using Aquaticus more so for it. We also have double spell reduction towards our middle, so that they hopefully don't die. Biggest issue with this is we don't have any cleanse. However, Voice of Orpheus can be slotted in, and Mercy can't. So Voice of Orpheus is probably the main thing you'd want to slot in if you're finding that Death Mark and other similar mechanics are being too annoying. And we are doing this with Elemental Bow. Everyone might not have Elemental Bow. However, this is a pure Elemental team, other than Hero class, because there is no Hero class with Elemental. So it ends up working out pretty well. It's also really good at feeding Aquaticus mana, because it creates both green and blue, both of which fill right into, of course, Aquaticus. And unfortunately, we can't use Mirage Queen, because Mirage Queen is only for Blue Guild War Day and Red Guild War Day. However, obviously it does not have red overlap because it does not use red. But we'll go for this, get our enchant, get our mana. After this, we'll go for, I guess, a yellow just to get Elemental Bow and hope it doesn't miss. He's about to convert, though, green to purple. That is actually problematic because that's one of the 2 colors we create. We can let him have a little bit of value here. I believe we're mostly going to deny it, though. I was saying I'm going to go for a green there just so he denies out most of his value. He does still get some off the top. We have enchant, so we're still getting some amount of mana over time. I think I am going to go for a poke there. Just going to get a Life and Death. Those things better not die to that Life and Death, as Life and Death normally does. So there's a 100% chance those will die next turn. No, hopefully they don't. It's 10% chance per turn with 0% on first turn. But they sure love to die sometimes. Okay, we'll go for that. Unfortunately, missing our extra turn. Luckily, a lot of things are getting close to full mana, so we'll probably go for a blue here, let it leak into the other one. Actually, we'll take a green to blue just so both of them get full mana rather than one, so we can go throw some board control into a, wrong one, board control. Their ability look really similar. Make sure not to cast the wrong one if you're using both of them together. But we'll go for that, and then we'll go for board clear, which will hopefully feed full mana into that. We got 1 kill. I wish we could target that, but unfortunately it's stealthy. Him putting Death Mark on it made sure that we would have a guaranteed chance of not Death Marking this turn. Unfortunately, it does do 3 damage to us, so I am going to have to take a turn to go and get some mana there. Ideally, those will not die, and they don't, so we're getting pretty good lucky off of not dying to Death Marks. That's good. We do not get an extra turn again off the Elemental Bow. Quite unfortunate. Main reason for that is probably because the denial of green that he was doing earlier left the board with a little bit less green than it would normally have. We actually haven't been able to get an Infernus. However, he hasn't been doing nothing. We have been getting 3 damage per turn off him. We could also use him for a board clear whenever we need it. He also has a lot more concentrated of a damage when he ends up getting it down. But we'll go here for a... we still have our extra turn run, right? Yeah, it's not frozen right now. So we can go for that. It's going to be very, very little damage, but we can get something off the board to try to feed the other one to full, like if we can get green alignment. So we're going to go for there. Unfortunately, no green alignment. I cannot drop that for full mana. So we'll probably just leave that as is and just grab a Infernus then and hope that ends up killing the little gap right there. And that is pretty much matched, unless Life and Death trolls us with a billion Deathmark kills. We should be okay. So right here, we'll go for the triple hit. Unfortunately, web, so not as much value, but we still get board clear. We got a Skull Poke there, so I will go for that because it will die off a burn, assuming burn does not cleanse, and of course it will. No, there we go. Luckily, it does not. So we'll go for that. We'll get this down, get her a little bit of a poke. Probably just do it on the only thing we can do it on, since we can't actually hit the Life and Death. You know, Life and Death can actually still win this battle. When is Life and Death getting nerfed? Now, Life and Death isn't too bad. The biggest issue with it is when you bring it into pure color teams, when you're restricting yourself deliberately to pure color, like we have been with most of these teams. Mostly because it gives you less options to actually counter it. If you just build up a skull spam team that covers all colors, or, you know, not using all the same color, it's surely enough to easily kill out a Life and Death. Biggest issue is when you're restricted to one, especially when you don't have some of those bigger skull spam options to use, depending on what the color is. So right here, we're still webbed, even though the thing that would have webbed us is dead. So I'm not going to bother casting that. We're probably just going to hold out. We do need an extra turn to go get our mana back up, so we'll kind of just wait. Luckily, we get that up, so we're going to go for that. It just resummoned an entire team of giant spiders, so that is quite unfortunate. Is Life and Death truly going to win after this? It actually can. It really could still win. That's one of the slight bad things about these Infernus-like troops, actually, is they do multiple instances of damage, and especially with her doing 4 instances of damage, that are 4 independent procs. So if anything has a thing that triggers based on damage, for example, this, Life and Death, or specifically Orb Weaver, it will multi-trigger. So you do have to be very, very careful around that, it looks like, whenever we do end up using this into the future. Because if we end up seeing a Life and Death team, we're probably actually going to want to switch out of Mistralis. Seems like that might be one of the other big counters. So the 3 biggest ones are going to be Freeze. It's going to be anything that has a trait that can end up triggering off of whenever it takes any damage. And it's also going to be decently hard countered by... oh gosh, what was the third? Oh, by, no, Freeze? That. I just mentioned a third earlier and I already forgot what it was, fail. And she'll die to that. Apparently, doesn't like status effects. Oh, and stun. Yes. It hates pretty much all status effects, to be honest. We might actually need to have a cleanse on it after testing these. I think, so far, the Wild Queen one, I would say, is the absolute best, if we're going to bother bringing that. Though that might be mostly because of Wild Queen, but also because we could use it as a Mythic Jumble, if nothing else. But anyways, we obviously lost this battle because Life and Death is Life and Death. So let's do one last thing, and that is, of course, not that. That's just Fire Bombs. Let's find a harder team. Let's not waste our gems. Find one over here. Here we go. Here's a standard Truffle team that might actually be used on a Guild War Defend. It's pretty standard. Okay, let's go use the Wild Queen version of this one last time. So here's definitely the strongest one so far. So it's still 3 Infernus-like troops like the other one. However, it's pure brown, so we do keep gaining barrier on brown for our Titan. And it does use Titan, so it does give us those extra durability stats, unlike the previous one where we did not use a frontline tank because Stormcaller does not tank that well. But we'll go for this here. We want to get an extra turn, even if we end up losing our turn as quickly as possible, even if we're frozen. Yet again, another hard counter. So many Frost Mages. Luckily, once we get a stunned off of Obsidius, we don't really need to worry about it much. So I'm going to go for a brown here, even though he gets poked, just because we have 50% reduction, so it doesn't matter as much. We're actually going to hold this ability for the most part. We're mostly using it for its stun, actually. While we can use it for its ability in board control, and you can be scouting out for that board control. For example, we can get a blue right over there if we do that. It's not an extra turn, though. But you do want to be scouting out for it. But we mostly want to be using it for its stun more so than anything. So right here, we'll go for that. We'll have full mana for next turn so we can go jumble up and hopefully have some really good alignment to just win this battle. He actually does create some green there. Unfortunately, not in a way that we can end up using it. So we are just going to go for some brown explosion. Technically, you can end up getting a guarantee 4 mana to something that's completely blocked. If you have enchant plus the 2 mana to all browns, that will end up accounting for 4 mana then. So here we'll go and end up attack reducing the thing that we think is going to be the biggest threat there. Because we kind of just assumed that 2 would have died there. Unfortunately, only 1 dies, but it's not going to be that big a deal. Again, we could look for alignment off of this. Probably not going to for the sake of time, just because it can take a little while to try to figure out where a 5x5 will actually land properly. Well, let's go for that, get a nice little shuffle, go for Wild Queen again. And by far, this is the strongest team that we end up testing here. So this is, who knows, maybe we'll use this as our next Brown Day and see how it goes. We already have a pretty solid Brown Day if I'm not mistaken, but nothing else. It covers a lot of ground. You have a frontline tank, you have spell reduction, you have a lot of mana accumulation, you have a lot of actual damage, and you can attack reduce so they don't do as much to you on skulls. So has a lot of things kind of like mixing together. I think its biggest issue will be slow start if you can't get an extra turn. Most battles will be slow start with her if you can't land that initial extra turn, as most teams built all around her will probably be blocking a lot of mana, if not necessarily pure color, probably in a way that still ends up blocking some, because it's one of the main benefits of enchant is to feed mana to things that are blocked by other components. But yeah, that's by far the best one we've tested so far, so we'll maybe test it for next Brown Guild War Day, see how it goes, as Guild War is right around the corner, after all. But anyways, guys, that'll wrap it up for this video. We'll be testing, of course, this Mythic more into the future. I'll be streaming probably about half an hour after this video ends up going up. So we will be doing that probably later tonight as well, and messing around with the Mythic some, of course doing Bounty Hunter, and all that good stuff. But yeah, as far as this Mythic, I would say is worth considering. It does definitely seem to be above average, and there's probably compositions I haven't tested yet that's going to also be pretty good with, just because a Mythic jumble that is actually viable is a pretty strong option, not to mention even if you only use it for its enchant, it could potentially be considered worth it. So has a lot of potential for it going forward. Just have to go and test more synergies and see if we can get nice broken teams with it. But it's definitely worth considering if you don't have it. Also, the other Stormheim Mythic is rather bad, so you definitely want to get this Mythic rather than getting the other one, as the other one basically just does one single barrier on extra turns, which is extremely bad. If it barriered your entire team on extra turn, it could maybe be viable, but all it does is a single one per, and it's pretty underwhelming. So it also is like a true damage thing that doesn't even get like a one-shot, which makes it even more underwhelming. But yeah, this if you're going for a Stormheim Mythic, or if you need one to get 10+ stars Stormheim, which you can currently reach 17 as I showed earlier, it's worth considering picking this up, even just for that purpose, even if you don't plan on using it much. But it's a great utility troop, similar to a lot of the Infernus-like troops lately. They almost all get used like utility, kind of like Obsidius and stuff like that. Very rarely do you actually necessarily use them for their damage, as we kind of saw with the Life and Death team, because there are quite a few things in the meta that do pretty hard counter them when you're doing multiple instances of damage like that. So do be careful with that. Not to mention Frost Mage is just the bane of its existence, which is really, really popular due to its capability of disabling out a lot of things, mostly due to Submerge, which these troops do bypass, but mostly the freeze, of course. But anyways, guys, that'll wrap it up for here. Hope you all have a wonderful week. Stay safe from the virus, and if you have any other questions, feel free to leave it below. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you so much for watching.